The call came at 3:14 a.m. Ethan Reed was used to late-night distractions, emails from clients across time zones, the occasional drunk text from friends who didn't know he kept strict boundaries. But this call was different. It wasn't the ringtone that startled him, it was the silence that followed the first word. "Is this Mr. Reed?" The voice on the other end asked, calm and clinical. "A nurse, maybe. Or a doctor pretending not to panic." "Yes," Ethan replied, still groggy, pushing off the sheets. "Speaking." "This is St. Mark's Medical Center in San Francisco. I'm afraid your brother, Daniel Reed, has been admitted. He's in critical condition. Comatose." The rest of the conversation blurred. Words like head trauma, possible seizure, and still investigating the cause floated past Ethan's ears like smoke from a burning building. He nodded, said he would be there, then ended the call and sat in the dark. Daniel. His twin. The more sensitive one. The quieter one. The one who'd left Chicago years ago to build a life in tech, alone, ambitious and distant. Ethan hadn't seen him in nearly 6 months. They'd texted, briefly. Daniel had sounded tired. But Daniel always sounded tired. Ethan had assumed he was just adjusting to the grind. Who wasn't? He booked the earliest flight out. By 8 a.m., he was in the air, heading west, staring blankly at the cloud-covered sky. When he arrived at the hospital, the first thing he noticed was the smell, bleach and sorrow. He followed a nurse through a maze of white halls, past flickering fluorescent lights, into a private ICU room. And there he was. Daniel. Unmoving. Pale. Tubes threading out of his body like vines on a withering tree. Machines beeping in steady, robotic rhythm. It was like looking into a mirror left in a freezer, identical in form, frozen in time. Ethan took a step closer. His chest ached in a way he hadn't felt in years. Daniel's hands, usually animated, were limp. His eyes, once full of questions and quiet defiance, were closed. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat. For a long time, he said nothing. On the nightstand beside the hospital bed sat Daniel's things, a phone, a leather-bound notebook, a USB stick, and his work ID badge, Trivex Technologies, Senior Data Analyst. Daniel's photo stared back at him. Same jawline. Same dark hair. Same reluctant smirk. Ethan picked up the notebook and flipped it open. The first few pages were full of bullet points, data flow diagrams, notes on machine learning models, acronyms he only vaguely recognized. But on the 5th page, something changed. There were no graphs. Just a line of messy handwriting in all caps. If something happens to me, check the drive. Trust no one. Ethan stared at the words for a long moment. Then he looked at the USB. It was plain, unlabeled, black plastic. Ordinary. But heavy in meaning now. He pocketed it and leaned back. His mind drifted, unwillingly, to the last time they had talked. 4 weeks ago. Daniel had called. He almost never called. "Hey," Daniel had said, voice small. "You busy?" Ethan had been tired, drained after a client meeting, and half watching a game on mute. "What's up?" he replied. "I don't know. Work's been weird." "Weird how?" There had been a pause. Daniel had hesitated. "People are acting strange. Like, watching me. Pushing me out. I'm probably overthinking." Ethan remembered his own voice, flat, dismissive. "Maybe just take a break, Dan. You've always been the sensitive one." Daniel had laughed softly. But it wasn't real. "Yeah. Maybe I'm just soft." That had been the end of it. Now here he was, sitting beside his brother's lifeless body, staring at the consequences of those words. "You've always been the sensitive one." Ethan stood and walked to the small window overlooking the San Francisco skyline. Gray clouds. Office towers. Somewhere out there was Trivex Technologies, the company Daniel had worked for. A multi-billion-dollar tech firm. Clean, sleek, eye-obsessed. Ethan had only read about it in the news. Daniel had been so proud to land a job there. It was supposed to be the beginning of something. Ethan turned back toward the room. He looked again at the ID badge. Daniel Reed. Senior Data Analyst. Access Level 4. Then, an idea hit him. A mad, terrifying, Impossible idea. He could do it. He could step into Daniel's shoes. He could walk into that company. Sit at Daniel's desk. Ask questions. Smile like Daniel. Speak like him. Pretend he was just recovering from burnout. Would anyone notice? Would they care? More importantly, would they dare question him? Ethan glanced at the hospital mirror. He stood in front of it and pulled his hood down. The resemblance was perfect. But there was one thing they didn't share. Daniel's eyes always held kindness, vulnerability. Ethan's eyes now held fire. He looked down at his brother one last time. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he whispered. "But I'm here now. And I'm going to finish what you started. Or destroy what tried to end you." He stepped out of the room, clutching the USB in his pocket like a weapon. Daniel might have been silenced. But Ethan had found his voice. And it was just beginning to speak. It took Ethan 2 full days before he walked through the glass doors of Trivex Technologies pretending to be Daniel. He had spent those days in Daniel's apartment, combing through every drawer, every folder, every sticky note stuck to the fridge. The place was painfully neat, exactly like Daniel. Everything had its place. The kitchen was organized alphabetically, the books by color, the shoes lined up with military precision. But what struck Ethan most wasn't what was present, it was what was missing. There were no photos. No signs of friendship. No laughter, no memories stuck on the walls. Just one person trying to survive in silence. The laptop was password protected, but Ethan guessed right after a few tries, an old family password, 2pines88. The desktop was mostly work-related. Graphs, simulations, data logs. But one folder stood out, titled simply, Noise. Inside were dozens of files. Screenshots of Slack messages. Recordings from Zoom calls. Handwritten notes scanned into PDFs. The tone in each was subtle, but insidious. Passive-aggressive remarks. Undermining comments. Gaslighting. Daniel had been documenting everything. And still, he hadn't said a word to anyone, except Ethan. Once. And Ethan had failed to listen. Now he had a second chance. A stolen chance, maybe. But a chance nonetheless. The morning he stepped into Daniel's clothes, he took an extra moment in front of the mirror. Hair brushed the way Daniel always wore it. Shirt slightly wrinkled. The same navy windbreaker Daniel wore in his company ID photo. But the eyes. Ethan leaned closer to the glass. His eyes were sharp, tense, alive. Daniel's were not. Not anymore. It was enough. He walked into Trivex at 8:04 a.m. The building was a marvel of glass and steel, all clean lines and quiet efficiency. The kind of place that whispered we build the future in every light fixture, every security scan, every cold smile. He scanned Daniel's ID badge at the turnstile. It blinked green. No questions. As the elevator rose, Ethan rehearsed Daniel's tone in his head, soft, careful, polite to the point of erasure. The doors opened to the 16th floor. Daniel's floor. Rows of desks. Glass offices. Minimalist decor. People in smart casual, heads down, tapping away. A few looked up and nodded at him. "Hey Daniel," someone said, walking past with coffee. He nodded back. "Morning." He tried to keep his tone light, casual. Like someone who had been away on sick leave and was just easing back into the world. At Daniel's desk, second row from the window, near the fire exit, everything was exactly as it had been in the hospital photos. Sam notebook. Sam small cactus. Same ergonomic mouse. He sat down. Logged into the computer with the credentials Daniel had saved on a sticky note hidden under the drawer. Do read /Morningstar21. The screen flickered to life. The same desktop background as the laptop at home. He opened the same noise folder. There were files here he hadn't seen yet. A document labeled Red Flags, Final. He opened it. It was a list of names. 5. 1. Marcus Flynn, Direct Supervisor. 2. Claire Donovan, HR Director. 3. Neil Baxter, IT Security Lead. 4. Gregory Caldwell, VP of Operations. 5. Unknown, Initial JR. Each had a bullet list of suspicious actions underneath. Etanes Pulse Weekend. Daniel had been building a case. Quietly, methodically. But something had stopped him before he could finish. A Slack message popped up in the corner of the screen.
Maya, product au PSA.
Great to see you back. Let me know if you want to catch up sometime. Lunch? Ethan hesitated. Then typed, sure. Thanks, Maya. He had no idea who Maya was.
Another message came through.
This one from Marcus Flynn.
Marcus, welcome back, read.
Let's catch up at 10 a.m. Bring the latest model projections. Ethan stared at the message for a full 10 seconds.
Marcus.
The man at the top of the list. The one who, according to Daniel's notes, had used intimidation, sarcasm, and exclusion to slowly bleed him dry.
At 9h59, Ethan knoquait dont Marcus's office d'or.
Marcus didn't look up.
Come in.
He stepped inside. The room smelled of cinnamon coffee and aftershave. Marcus finally looked up and gave a half smile. Didn't expect you back so soon, he said, gesturing to the chair. But good. Shows resilience. That's what we like here. Ethan sat down, holding a folder filled with generic graphs he'd printed off the company drive. He didn't speak.
Marcus leaned back.
Look, whatever happened, mental health break, burnout, whatever, you bounce back, we don't ask questions. We're a team, right? Ethan forced a nod. Marcus narrowed his eyes.
You look different.
Maybe I just slept, Ethan replied.
Marcus looked a little too.
Then his face straightened. Jokes aside, keep your head down for a few weeks. Some people were worried. You started acting strange before you left.
Strange how? Marcus shrugged.
Questioning procedures. Poking around things you shouldn't. You were always reliable before. Ethan met his gaze. And now? Marcus leaned in.
Just be smart. You're back. That is what matters.
The meeting ended shortly after.
Ethan walked back to his desk, mind spinning.
Daniel had been gaslit, controlled, then sidelined. And now, Marcus wanted to sweep it all under the rug. Ethan opened the red flags file again. He added a note under Marcus's name.
Stay watching. Stay controlling.
At lunch, Maya stopped by. A petite woman with sharp eyes and an easy smile. So, how are you feeling? She asked, sitting across from him in the cafeteria. Better, he said. She studied him. You're not him, are you?
The word hit like a slap. Ethan froze.
Excuse me. She shrugged. You're walking like him. Talking like him. But your eyes? Not Daniel.
You don't look scared.
There was a pause. Then she smiled. Whatever you're doing, keep going. He didn't deserve what they did to him. And with that, she stood and walked away. Ethan sat in silence, the buzz of the cafeteria fading around him.
Someone knew.
And someone was on his side. That night, he returned to Daniel's apartment. He sat at the desk, lit only by the screen of his brother's laptop. On the wall was a post-it Daniel had written long ago. To see the future, sometimes you have to stop looking forward. Ethan turned the USB in his fingers. Daniel had looked back, and nearly lost everything. Now Ethan would do the same. But with open eyes. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at Daniel's desk, replaying the meeting with Marcus over and over in his head. The half-smiles, the warnings disguised as advice, the tone that suggested concern but smelled of control. Daniel had written his name first for a reason.
Marcus Flynn wasn't just a bad manager.
He was a manipulator.
The kind that made you question your memory, your instinct, your worth.
The kind that smiled as he broke you down piece by piece and called it mentorship. Ethan opened the red flags file again and stared at Marcus's section. Daniel had laid out everything, bullet points with dates, short descriptions, links to Slack conversations, and most chillingly, audio recordings labeled simply by timestamps. He clicked on one. The voice that came through the speakers was Marcus's, unmistakable in its smooth, patronizing cadence. Listen, Reed, I know you're the sensitive type, but this isn't college anymore. People don't get gold stars for raising concerns. They get left behind. Then Daniel's voice, hesitant, I just think the projections are off. If we move forward without validating. You're questioning leadership again? Marcus cut him off. You really want to do this in front of the team? The recording ended. Ethan leaned back in his chair, fists clenched. This wasn't just toxic leadership. This was targeted erosion. A slow, methodical dismantling of someone's confidence under the guise of performance management. He clicked on the next file. Come on, lighten up, Reed. You make the whole room tense. Smile a little. You'll be easier to work with. Another. I wouldn't go to HR with this. Claire's already on edge, and if she thinks you're starting drama. Another. Just sign the damn report, Daniel. It's not your job to rewrite policy. Ethan sat in silence. He looked around Daniel's apartment, silent, clean, cold. How long had Daniel endured this? How many days had he come home, swallowed it all down, and written nothing but numbers? He looked at the time. 2:13 a.m. Then he opened a new folder on Daniel's laptop and titled it, Execution. This wasn't going to be subtle. Not anymore. At work the next morning, Ethan arrived early. He needed time. He scanned Daniel's badge and slipped into the mostly empty floor. A few early risers milled about. Lights were still dim. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and began gathering everything, every audio file, every Slack message, every email Daniel had flagged. He sorted them into categories: verbal abuse, forced compliance, document manipulation. He cross-referenced them with Daniel's project logs and meeting schedules. Then he did something Daniel never dared do. He created a new, anonymous email account. Username, Inside Voice. Password, Mirrored Justice 2025. He opened a blank email, attached 5 files, and typed a subject line. Flagged conduct, Marcus Flynn, Trivex Tech. He sent it to 4 recipients. 1. Claire Donovan, HR Director. 2. Olivia Grant, Data Ethics Lead. 3. Legal@trivextech.com. 4. Whistleblow@trivextech.com, an inbox Ethan wasn't sure anyone ever checked. He pressed send. Then he waited. At 10:17 a.m., an HR assistant arrived at Marcus's office. She didn't knock, just walked in with a tight face and a printed sheet in hand. By 10:45, Marcus was called into a closed-door meeting. By 11:30, the Slack channel started buzzing. Sarah, data engineering, anyone know what's up with Marcus? Jeremy, UX heard legal's involved. Lena, DevOps good. Guy always gave me the creeps. By noon, Marcus emerged from the office, pale and visibly furious. He avoided eye contact with everyone, walked directly to his desk, and grabbed his coat. At 12:04, a company-wide email went out. Subject, Organizational Update. Body, effective immediately, Marcus Flynn is no longer employed at Trivex Technologies. We thank him for his service and wish him the best in future endeavors. Ethan stared at the screen. Just like that, the first name on the list was gone. But there was no satisfaction. Not really. Because Marcus didn't scream. He didn't apologize. He didn't crumble or confess. He walked out like any other executive moving on. Quiet. Polished. Untouched. Ethan wanted to feel something. Triumph, maybe. Relief. But all he felt was the weight of what came next. Claire Donovan. Neil Baxter. Gregory Caldwell. And someone hiding behind the initials JR. He stepped away from his desk and walked down the hallway to the break room. Olivia was there, pouring coffee, scrolling her phone. She looked up when he entered. Big morning, she said. Yeah, Ethan replied. She studied him. You sent it, didn't you? He didn't answer. She smiled slightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. He deserved worse. I know, Ethan said. There was a pause. I found something else, Olivia said, lowering her voice. In the compliance archives. A report. Daniel flagged a data breach risk 6 months ago. Went nowhere. Who blocked it? She hesitated. That's the thing. The logs are clean. Too clean. Someone wiped the trail? She nodded. You don't scrub logs unless you're hiding something. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Do you still have access to his private repo? he asked. Yeah. Why? I need to see what else they tried to bury. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded.
You'll send you the access link tonight.
But be careful.
You're stirring up ghosts.
Ethan nodded and left the room. Back at his desk, a new Slack message blinked.
Claire Donovan, Daniel, can we talk? Conférence room C. Now.
His heart skipped. He grabbed his notebook and headed down the hall. The room was empty when he entered. Claire came in moments later, closed the door, and sat across from him. Her expression was unreadable. So, you've been busy, she said.
Ethan said nothing. I assume you're behind the report.
Still, he didn't respond.
You've changed, Daniel.
You used to avoid conflict. Now you seem to welcome it. He leaned forward slightly. Maybe I stopped being afraid. Claire exhaled through her nose. Look.
I'm not your enemy.
But you're walking a dangerous line. Do you know how many NDAs we process every quarter?
How many whistleblower cases vanish?
Daniel didn't vanish, Ethan said. He ended up in the hospital. Her eyes flickered.
A crack in the armor.
You can keep pushing, she said quietly. But just know, you're not the only one watching. She stood and left.
Ethan sat alone in the room for a long moment.
It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And he wasn't sure who it was meant to protect. Ethan didn't return to his desk after the meeting with Claire. Instead, he stepped outside onto the rooftop terrace, a quiet corner of the building rarely used by anyone but a few smokers and the occasional overworked engineer needing air. He needed space.
Space to think.
The wind was cold, slicing across his face, but it helped. It cut through the fog building in his mind, the one layered with tension, questions, and the bitter taste of unfinished business.
Marcus was gone.
But what had really changed? Nothing in the company's tone, the culture, or the systems had shifted. Claire's words kept echoing in his ears, "You're not the only one watching." She hadn't sounded angry. Just tired. Like someone who had made too many compromises and forgotten where the line was. Ethan leaned against the railing and looked down at the city below.
100,000 lives moving in straight lines, pretending not to collide.
Just like this company. A machine that ran on silence. He pulled out his phone and opened the shared folder Olivia had sent him the night before, a link to Daniel's private cloud storage, encrypted and segmented. Olivia had cracked it using access credentials Daniel had trusted her with long ago. Apparently, she'd once helped him document a minor compliance concern.
It hadn't gone anywhere.
She assumed it wouldn't. But Daniel had kept trusting her. Inside the folder was a subfolder named Hannah_Cole.
Ethan blinked.
He opened it. There were 4 documents, a screenshot, and 1 audio file. He clicked on the first doc, a PDF titled incident_report_draft.docs. It was dated 15 months ago. Daniel had written it as a draft complaint on behalf of someone else, Hannah Cole, a junior data analyst. The file described a pattern, repeated uncredited work, exclusion from key meetings, and sudden performance reviews that contradicted her output. The second document was a formal email draft Hannah had written but never sent.
Ethan scanned the lines.
I don't want to believe that speaking up will cost me my job, but I'm starting to think staying quiet might cost me more. He opened the screenshot next.
A Slack message. Claire Donovan to Hannah Cole.
Let's not escalate things unnecessarily. If this is just a misunderstanding, filing a report will make it permanent. The audio file was dated 2 days before Hannah's name disappeared from the Trivex employee directory. Daniel's voice again, this time quiet, almost pleading.
Hannah, please don't do anything alone.
I'll help you. Just wait until I can put something together. Then her voice.
I've waited, Daniel.
I've waited for someone to care. But they all look away. Even you. The recording clicked off abruptly.
Ethan's briscocked.
He looked up at the sky, then back down at the city. Somewhere below, maybe just a few blocks away, was a family who had lost their daughter. A woman who had tried to raise her voice in a company that prided itself on innovation and inclusion. But no one had heard her.
Except Daniel. And now Ethan.
He closed the file and stared at the folder name again, Hannah_Cole. She had trusted Daniel. Daniel had tried to help. And it had cost him everything. Later that day, Ethan returned to the office, numb but burning. At his desk, he printed one page from the file, Hannah's unsent email. Just that.
Nothing else.
He folded it and slipped it into his pocket. At lunch, he took the elevator to the first floor, past the security desk, and into the building's public lobby. There, near the exit, was a wall of employee photos, smiling faces, achievements, team shots. Daniel wasn't on it. Neither was Hannah. Ethan walked to the base of the wall, knelt down, and slipped the folded paper between the bottom corner of the glass and the marble. It stuck.
Visible.
Quiet. Anonymous. On the outside of the folded paper, he wrote one sentence in block letters. She was not invisible. He walked away. By the time he returned to the 16th floor, the office was buzzing again. Not with talk of Hannah, not yet, but with the ripples of Marcus's removal still radiating across departments. People were adjusting, whispering, making mental notes about what could no longer be said in meetings, who could no longer be trusted to protect them. Claire passed by his desk and paused.
You're making wave, Daniel.
He looked up at her. Am I? You think you're going to fix this company with printed notes and anonymous emails? I think I can make people look. She didn't respond right away. Then quieter she said, Hannah wasn't the first. Then why did no one stop it? She met his eyes. Because sometimes the system isn't broken. Sometimes it's working exactly as designed.
Claire walked away. Ethan sat back.
The next name on the list was hers. But for now, he opened a new document. At the top, he typed a heading. Subject, Historical Suppression of Internal Complaints, Trivex HR. He began drafting.
Note en exposé.
A record. He wrote Hannah's story. What she had endured. What Daniel had tried to do. What Ethan was doing now. He anonymized the names. Used initials. Referred to departments, not people. But he made sure every detail was factual, sourced, and quietly damning.
By the end of the day, the document was 7 pages long.
He posted it to an internal message board under a burner account. Truthwatcher_08. He didn't write a call to action. He didn't ask for change. He simply told the story. By 5 p.m., it had 43 views. By 5:30, it had over 200. Someone had printed it and pinned it on the office bulletin board by the kitchen.
No name. No signature.
But Ethan knew the ghost of Hannah Cole was no longer silent. And neither was he. As he packed his bag to leave, his inbox dinged.
One message.
From Olivia. Subject line, You're not done. I found something in the IT audit logs. Inside the email was one line. JR accessed Daniel's files 3 days before his collapse. I have proof.
Ethan stared at the screen, pulse rising.
The fifth name. The initials Daniel hadn't been able to trace.
JR.
Whoever that was, they'd touched the files. They'd known what Daniel was building. And they might have been the one who made sure it stopped. The list wasn't just a guide anymore. It was a countdown. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the initials, JR. He sat in the dim light of Daniel's apartment that evening, the same chair Daniel had likely used night after night while building his quiet case against the company. The silence in the room was heavier now, thick with unfinished plans, unspoken fears, and names left incomplete. He scanned the employee directory again, this time with purpose. There were only a few people in Trivex with initials that matched: Jordan Ramirez in DevOps, Jenna Rice in Legal, and Jacob Rains in Internal Strategy. None of them were close to Daniel, at least not according to the access logs or the meeting records Olivia had shared. But one stood out, Jacob Rains. Senior Strategy Advisor.
Office on the executive floor.
Rarely interacted with junior staff, but had administrative access to most departmental drives, including data analytics.
Daniel's drive.
According to the audit logs, Jacob had accessed Daniel's folder 3 days before Daniel's hospitalization.
No edit, no comment, juste à view.
Just enough to know what Daniel had been collecting.
Ethan leaned back.
His hands were cold. Jacob Rains wasn't on the list of visible enemies. He was the ghost behind the curtain. Watching. The next morning at work, the tension had shifted. The anonymous post about Hannah Cole had gone viral internally. At least, as viral as something could go within a company of strict protocols and even stricter leadership. Employees whispered about it in elevators, by the coffee machine, in Slack messages sent with delete after reading settings. Some were angry. Some were scared. Some, for the first time, looked over their shoulders when they spoke. Ethan noticed a distinct change in Olivia's demeanor too.
She walked a little faster. Spoke a little quietly.
She met him near the stairwell before the start of the day, her voice low and urgent. You've got their attention now, she said. Whose? Everyone's.
Légal.
HR. Maybe even the board. You said you found something in the audit logs.
JR.
She nodded.
Jacob Rennes.
But be careful, he's not just another executive. He's the one they send when something needs to disappear without a trace. Ethan stiffened.
Daniel's project.
I don't have direct proof he buried it, Olivia said, but I know this: Daniel's folder was flagged for deletion 24 hours after Jacob accessed it. The deletion was only reversed because Daniel had made a mirrored backup off-network. That's what you found in the USB. So Daniel had known. He'd seen the shadow, and he'd backed up his work just in time. Ethan said, we need to know what else Jacob's watching. We will, Olivia replied. But for now, you need to watch someone else too.
Who? Claire. Ethan blinked.
She already knows I'm not acting like Daniel. That's not the problem, Olivia said. It's that she hasn't reported it. Ethan paused. You think she's protecting me? I think she's deciding whether to protect you, or use you. That day, Ethan returned to his desk with a sharpened edge. He could feel the air shifting. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. People smiled a second too late. Some looked at him differently, not with suspicion, but with caution. As if he had become something unstable, something capable of blowing holes in the carefully managed quiet of their world. At 10:07 a.m., he received a calendar invite from Claire Donovan. Subject: Touch base.
Location: HR Office 22B. Time: 11h du matin.
He accepted. Then opened Daniel's notebook and reviewed the section on Claire again. Daniel had once described her as polished, composed, distant, but cracked at the edges. Someone who had once tried to do the right thing, but had folded slowly over the years, like metal under pressure. At 11 o'clock sharp, he knocked on her door. Come in, Claire said, already seated behind her desk. Her office was immaculate, almost sterile, no family photos, no personal clutter. Just policy binders, a sleek monitor, and a half-empty cup of coffee. Daniel, she said, nodding toward the chair across from her.
Ethan sat.
She studied him for a long time before speaking. You've changed, she said, not unkindly. Even the way you walk. You used to shuffle. Now you move like you've made peace with something. Ethan said nothing. Claire folded her hands. I want to ask you a question. Off the record. Okay. Why are you really here? Ethan hesitated. To finish what I started. Which is? She tilted her head. He said, to make sure people like Hannah Cole are never forgotten. Claire's face twitched slightly. I remember Hannah, she said softly. Smart. Honest. Fragile in all the wrong places. She trusted this place. She shouldn't have. There was a long silence. I tried, Claire said, almost to herself. In the beginning. I really did. I flagged things. I escalated. I filed reports. What happened? Nothing. Or worse than nothing. I got invited to a strategy alignment workshop, HR code for get back in line. So I did. I got quiet. I did what I was told. I kept my job. Ethan leaned forward. You know what they did to Daniel? Yes. And you're letting it happen again. Claire's eyes met his. I don't know who you are anymore, Daniel. But whoever you've become, be careful. This company is built on silence. When you speak, they don't listen, they prepare. Is that a threat?
No.
It's a fact. Ethan stood. Then here's another fact. I'm not going anywhere. Not until the truth is louder than the silence. He left the office without another word. Back at his desk, a Slack message came through. Unknown, you've stirred something you can't control. Stop. There was no user attached. No profile picture. Just those words. Ethan screenshot the message. Saved it to his mirrored backup. Then he opened a blank document and began writing again. This time, not a report. A story. The story of a company that rewarded compliance and punished truth. The story of a woman named Hannah. The story of a brother who became someone else to finish what couldn't be finished. And as he wrote, he realized something chilling. The most dangerous people weren't the ones shouting orders in public. They were the ones who watched silently from behind polished glass. Waiting. Measuring. Choosing when to strike. The shift wasn't instant. It came slowly, like a shadow creeping in from the edges of the room. At first, Ethan didn't notice it, the way he began speaking more curtly in meetings, the way his eyes scanned rooms not for truth but for leverage. He told himself it was tactical, strategic, controlled. But something inside him had started to twist. He wasn't just uncovering what had been done to Daniel anymore. He was engineering consequences, setting traps, learning how to turn their weapons against them. It was Olivia who first saw the change. They were in the quiet corner of the cafeteria, the same place they had met for the last 3 days, always keeping their voices low, their eyes moving. She slid a folder across the table to him. Network map of Jacob Raines's recent access logs, she said. He's been in legal, HR, and data ethics folders. Ethan flipped through the pages. He's cleaning up. He's preparing, Olivia corrected. They know something's coming. They don't know how much, Ethan said. She looked at him carefully. You've already decided, haven't you? Decided what? To use Lisa. Ethan paused. Lisa Tran was a mid-level operations coordinator, friendly with everyone but invisible to most. She had unknowingly been copied on an internal email weeks ago, one that revealed timeline discrepancies between Claire Donovan's performance reports and Jacob Raines's risk logs. A quiet inconsistency that, when magnified, could implicate them both in suppressing Daniel's concerns. Lisa didn't know what she had. Not yet. But Ethan did. I'm going to offer her a way out, he said. She'll either give me what I need, or she'll walk away.
No harm.
Olivia's voice was firm. That's not who you are. He looked at her. I can't afford to play clean anymore. You're starting to sound like them. He stood up, folder in hand. Maybe that's what it takes to beat them. That afternoon, he found Lisa in the resource room, sorting inventory. She smiled when she saw him, sincere, unguarded. Daniel, hey. How are you holding up? Better, Ethan said. Can I show you something? They sat down in a nearby breakout room. Ethan placed 2 documents side by side on the table, the email thread she had been copied on, and a spreadsheet extracted from Claire's department logs, both showing timestamp conflicts. He watched Lisa's expression shift from curiosity to confusion to something resembling fear. What is this? She asked. A mistake, he said calmly. One you were unintentionally connected to. One that could hurt you if someone else finds it first. Her voice trembled. Are you saying they'll blame me? I'm saying they might. Unless you help me clarify what happened. Lisa's hands shook slightly. I didn't do anything wrong. I know. And I'll make sure everyone else knows too. But I need you to tell me what you remember, who asked for the file update, who was in the room when it happened. She hesitated, then nodded. Jacob. He was rushing the monthly reports. Said not to worry about syncing them with HR logs. Ethan leaned back. Thank you. Lisa looked at him. Daniel, is everything okay? For a moment, he wanted to say no. He wanted to tell her the truth. That he wasn't Daniel. That her kindness mattered. That he hated using her trust. But instead, he nodded once, stood up, and walked away. By the end of the day, the revised report was complete, a timeline of edits, approvals, and silences. He had enough to tie Jacob Raines and Claire Donovan to the falsified documentation surrounding Daniel's last performance review. But something felt wrong. When he returned home that night, Olivia was waiting in front of Daniel's apartment. She looked tired. You used her, she said quietly. I protected her.
No.
You cornered her. You gave her a choice between survival and guilt. Just like they did to Daniel. Ethan didn't respond. You think you're different because your reasons are noble. But methods matter. He dropped his bag. This company doesn't respond to principles. Only pressure. And when this is over, who do you become? Ethan looked at her, voice low. I become the man Daniel needed me to be. There was a pause. Then Olivia said, he needed a brother. Not a weapon. She turned and walked down the hallway. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door behind her. That night, he couldn't sleep. The shadows in the apartment seemed to press inward, heavy with Daniel's absence. He opened the notebook again, flipping past the data logs, past the red flag names, until he reached a page near the back, a page Daniel had written late at night, the handwriting loose and drifting. I don't want to become like them. But I'm starting to understand why they are the way they are. Fear has a shape. It looks like a deadline, a meeting, a blank face in a performance review. I keep telling myself I'm still me. But every time I stay quiet, I lose a little more. Ethan closed the notebook. He saw himself now, sitting in a breakout room, manipulating an innocent woman. Watching her squirm. Holding back the truth. Was that what justice looked like? Or had he crossed into something else? The next morning, he arrived at work earlier than usual. He walked straight to Lisa's desk. She looked up, guarded. I owe you an apology, he said. Her eyes widened. You were caught in something you didn't choose, Ethan continued. And I used that.
I'm sorry.
Lisa searched his face for a moment, then nodded. Okay. He stepped back. If anything comes from this, I'll protect you. I promise. Before she could respond, a notification flashed across every screen on the floor. Subject, Internal Inquiry Notice. Body, effective immediately, an internal investigation is being launched into discrepancies related to departmental documentation and data security protocol. All team members are advised to cooperate fully with legal and compliance officers. A second later, his personal inbox dinged. From Legal Affairs. Subject, Mandatory Interview, Audit Inquiry. Time, 4 p.m. today. They were moving faster now. The machine had noticed the heat. And it was preparing to close in. The knock on the hospital door was gentle, almost hesitant. Olivia pushed it open slowly and stepped inside. Daniel was awake. It had happened overnight. No dramatic moment, no fanfare, just the slow blinking of eyes, a whisper for water, a nurse's urgent call. Now, a day later, he sat upright in his bed, pale but alert, staring quietly out the window as the city moved beneath the clouds. You're back, Olivia said softly, setting a small paper bag on the bedside table. Daniel turned toward her, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. He smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his expression. They say I've been asleep for weeks. She nodded. 27 days. Daniel looked down at his hands, thin and trembling. It doesn't feel real. I brought you tea, Olivia said, pulling a cup from the bag. You used to drink this every morning. Peppermint and ginger. He took it with both hands, grateful, but unsure. I don't remember that. You will, she said gently. He sipped slowly, then glanced up. Has Ethan been here? There was a pause. Olivia looked at him carefully. You remember him? Daniel nodded. Just flashes. His voice. A conversation, maybe a dream. She hesitated. He was here. He sat with you every day. Then he stopped. Maybe, a week ago. Daniel looked back toward the window. Did he give up? No, Olivia said. He went looking for answers. Daniel turned to her again. What happened to me? Her mouth opened, then closed. She sat in the chair beside his bed, trying to find the right words. You were trying to expose something. At Trivex. About the way people were treated. About how the system worked. Did I succeed? She hesitated. Not yet. Daniel looked down at his tea. I remember feeling afraid. Like I was drowning in a place I couldn't escape from, You weren't wrong. Then why did I stay? She didn't answer. He already knew.
Daniel set the tea down.
Where is he now? I don't know, Olivia said. But I think, he became you.
Daniel's eyes narrowed.
What do you mean? She looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, the same one that had sat on his hospital nightstand for weeks. She handed it to him. He left this. He didn't say goodbye. Daniel opened the notebook, flipping past pages filled with his own handwriting. But near the end, something changed. The writing was different.
Firmé.
More aggressive. It was Ethan's. Lines upon lines detailing meetings, conversations, plans. A record of everything Ethan had done while walking in Daniel's shoes. He read it in silence.
Claire Donovan. Jacob Rennes.
The email to HR. The anonymous posts. Lisa.
Olivia.
Even the guilt, the journal didn't shy away from the moral line Ethan had crossed. At the very end, there was a single paragraph.
You wore your face, Daniel.
I borrowed your silence and replaced it with fire. I did what I thought you wanted, but maybe it was what I needed.
You don't know anymore.
What I do know is that you mattered. And that someone had to say so. Daniel's hands trembled as he closed the notebook. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel whispered, he became me to finish something I didn't start for myself. Olivia's eyes were wet. He did it because he thought he failed you.
Daniel shook his head slowly.
No.
He failed me.
And now, I don't know who I am in this story. You're still you, Olivia said. But the story's not over. Back at Trivex, the internal investigation was accelerating. Ethan sat in the small windowless room reserved for compliance interviews. Across from him, a lawyer and a security officer watched him carefully. He was calm, almost detached, hands folded in his lap. You've been accessing documents outside your assigned scope, the lawyer said. Unauthorized activity. Ethan didn't answer. You've impersonated conversations with departments outside your role. He remained silent. You created an anonymous internal profile, used it to circulate unverified claims, and incited company-wide disruption.
Still no response.
The lawyer leaned forward. You understand these are grounds for termination.
Ethan meilleur eyes. Den terminat me.
She blinked, caught off guard. Ethan stood. But before you do, ask yourself, why would someone with everything to lose do this? The room was still. He turned to the security officer. People like you keep order. But sometimes order protects the wrong side. The officer didn't move. The lawyer tapped her pen once, then again. You're free to go, she said finally. For now.
Ethan walked out.
On his way back to Daniel's desk, he saw Olivia waiting near the elevator. Her eyes met his, but she didn't speak. She only handed him a folded piece of paper. He opened it.
Daniel Sawak.
That night, Ethan stood outside the hospital room for a long time. He didn't go in. Through the window, he could see Daniel sitting up, the notebook on his lap, reading by dim light. There was no resentment in his face.
Only something gently. More complicated.
Forgiveness, perhaps.
Understanding.
Ethan turned and walked away. He had worn his brother's life for nearly a month. He had uncovered rot, exposed the silences, and turned the mirror back on the people who had broken him. But now, it was Daniel's turn to choose what came next. Ethan didn't need to be the voice anymore. He had only ever meant to carry it long enough for Daniel to find his own again.
The sun agnelot over San Francisco, casting gold along the glass towers of Trivex Technology.
From the outside, the building looked like every modern promise, innovation, transparency, progress. But from where Ethan stood, at Daniel's desk, surrounded by silence, it felt more like a fortress. And he was standing at its final wall.
Jacob Rennes.
The last name.
The last gatekeeper.
The one who had hovered in the background, pulling strings no one could see. Ethan stared at the screen in front of him, a compiled dossier of every access log Olivia had gathered over the last 2 weeks. Jacob had touched files in almost every department, but his fingerprints were always light, view-only access, metadata edits, quiet modifications that left no visible trace. But there was one detail that stood out, a hidden audit trail showing that 3 days before Daniel collapsed, Jacob had entered his private project folder, copied data, then scrubbed the access time from the official log. Only the mirrored backup on the USB had preserved the record. Ethan had everything he needed. He walked down the hall to the 23rd floor, where the executive offices lived in a world apart from the open-plan noise below. The carpet was thicker here.
The air quiétait. The smile scoldait.
He didn't knock when he reached Jacob's office. He opened the door and stepped inside. Jacob Rains looked up from his desk with a mild expression, as if he'd been expecting him. "Mr. Reed," he said calmly, "or is it Mr. Reed's brother?" Ethan froze. Jacob smiled faintly. "You don't think I figured it out? Daniel Reed never looked me in the eye." "You do." That was the first sign. Ethan closed the door behind him. "Then you know why I'm here." "I know why you think you're here." Jacob leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin.
You want a confession?
An apology? Some grand admission of guilt that you can post anonymously in a Slack thread. "I want accountability," Ethan said.
For Anna.
For Daniel. For every person this company ground down and discarded. Jacob chuckled. "You think this is new? Every industry has pressure. Every corporation has blood on its balance sheets. You're just naive enough to think one story will change the system." "It might not," Ethan said, "but it'll change this one." He placed a printed document on Jacob's desk. It contained everything, the log data, the unauthorized access, the audit manipulation, and the false termination recommendation written by Jacob that had nearly ended Daniel's career. Jacob glanced at it, unimpressed. "And you're planning to send this to the board?" "No," Ethan said. "I already did." Jacob's expression flickered. "They're meeting tomorrow morning," Ethan continued. "Internal compliance is reviewing your access history as we speak. And Olivia found a whistleblower clause in your contract. If they fire you now, you lose everything. If you step down quietly, maybe you salvage a fraction." Jacob stood slowly. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," Ethan said, stepping closer. "You are. You built your kingdom on fear. But you forgot one thing." "What's that?" "Fear fades. And when it does, people remember what they deserve." Jacob's jaw tightened. Ethan turned and walked out without waiting for a reply. He didn't stop moving. Down the elevator. Across the floor. Past desks and glances and whispers. He didn't speak to anyone until he reached Olivia's desk. "It's done," he said. She looked up at him, a mix of relief and disbelief. "You confronted him?" "He knew," Ethan said. "He's known all along." "Do you think the board will act?" "They don't have a choice anymore." Later that afternoon, as Ethan packed Daniel's things for the last time, he felt no triumph. Only stillness. The war wasn't over. Not really. Systems didn't crumble overnight. But this battle, this stretch of darkness, it was closing. A soft knock interrupted him. Daniel stood in the doorway. He looked healthier. Stronger. But still quiet, still holding a kind of weight that couldn't be measured in bruises or time. "I saw the board memo," Daniel said. "Jacob's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Ethan nodded. "It's not enough. But it's a start." Daniel stepped into the office, eyes scanning the room that once belonged to him. "I read everything," he said. "What you did. What you became." "I had to," Ethan replied. "They weren't going to stop unless someone made them." Daniel sat at the desk and ran his hand along the surface, as if touching the ghosts still embedded there. "But you weren't just pretending to be me," he said. "You started living like me. Fighting like me. At some point, did you forget who you were?" Ethan didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Maybe. But I remember now." Daniel nodded slowly. "You were angry. So was I. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted change." "I know," Ethan said. "And now that you're back, it's yours again." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Daniel asked, "What will you do now?" "I don't know," Ethan said. "Maybe leave this place behind. Maybe start over." Daniel looked at him. "You could stay. Help fix what's broken. Ethan shook his head. You're the one they need. Not me. He handed Daniel a small USB drive. This has everything, he said. Your records. My notes. Every file we pulled. Daniel took it, his hand steady. Thank you, he said, for giving me back my voice. Ethan stood, reached for his bag, and paused at the door. I didn't just borrow your name, he said. I found mine inside it. Then he left. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Daniel sat alone in the office as the evening light filtered through the blinds. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel small. He felt seen, heard, whole. There were still walls to tear down. But now, he had the tools. And more importantly, he had a choice. Daniel came in early the next morning. For the first time in weeks, he walked into Trivex Technologies not as a man crushed by silence, but as one reclaimed by truth. The office felt different, lighter, but tense. Word of Jacob Raines's suspension had spread. People weren't whispering anymore, they were watching. Waiting to see what would happen next. Whether the walls would crack, or whether they'd quietly be repainted and forgotten again. Daniel knew what was coming. It wasn't victory. Not yet. It was resistance. Real change wouldn't arrive with a single investigation or an anonymous email. It would require rebuilding. New protocols. Real protections. And courage. From more than just him. He sat at what used to be his desk, Ethan's for the past month, and opened the inbox. Dozens of messages blinked back at him. Some congratulatory. Some wary. Some from names he didn't recognize at all. Employees from other floors, other departments, thanking him for speaking up. Or thanking whoever had the guts. He read each one. Not because he needed the praise. But because they were proof that silence had finally been broken. At exactly 9 a.m., he drafted a single message to the executive board. I appreciate the action taken regarding Mr. Raines. However, I urge you to take this further. If you truly want to rebuild trust, let the employees lead. Establish an internal ethics council. Fund anonymous mental health resources. Review HR's handling of prior complaints with third-party oversight. You know the numbers. What matters now is whether you listen to the stories. He hit send. Then he turned off the screen. By midday, Daniel found himself standing in the office kitchen. It was strange being back in this mundane space, surrounded by coffee cups, microwaved lunches, polite nods. A woman from finance passed him, paused, then turned back. Daniel, right? He nodded. I just wanted to say, thank you. For what you did. He smiled softly. I wasn't the only one. She gave a short laugh. Maybe not. But you were loud enough to make the rest of us listen. As she walked away, Daniel looked up and noticed the bulletin board by the sink. The folded page was still there. She was not invisible. He reached up and removed it carefully, unfolded it, and reread Hannah Cole's letter. He hadn't been able to save her. But her story had reached the light. He took the page back to his desk and tucked it gently into his notebook. It would never be thrown away again. Later that day, a message came through from Olivia. Let's talk. Rooftop. When he stepped out onto the roof terrace, the air was crisp. Olivia stood by the railing, her coat pulled tight, a folder under one arm. I wanted to wait until Ethan was gone before I showed you this, she said. She handed him the folder. Inside were internal memos, dating back over a year. Redacted emails. Risk flags buried under layers of HR jargon. Hidden reports, some of which Daniel himself had filed and never seen again. This is what they tried to erase, Olivia said. And what Ethan made sure survived. Daniel turned page after page. Each one a scar. Each one a record of pain turned invisible. Why give this to me now? He asked. Because you're not just the survivor anymore. You're the keeper of truth. If you want to stay and rebuild this place, you're going to need more than memory. You'll need proof. Daniel closed the folder. Thank you. She looked at him. What will you do?
I'm staying.
For now. Long enough to make sure this doesn't get buried again. Olivia nodded. Then you won't be alone. As the sun began to lower over the skyline, Daniel realized something. he no longer felt like a ghost in his own life. The weight in his chest wasn't fear. It was resolve. He returned to his desk and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. At the top, he wrote, "The Red File Initiative." Below, he began drafting a proposal. An independent, cross-department task force focused on transparency, ethical accountability, and protection for those who spoke up. He listed core goals: monthly reporting, third-party audit rights, mental health resources, anonymous input systems. He would present it in front of the entire executive board in a week. Not as a plea, but as a demand. The next morning, Daniel found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a printed resignation letter. Signed, Ethan Reed.
No explanation.
Just a single sentence scribbled in ink at the bottom. "You don't need me in your shadow anymore. And I'm finally ready to live in the light." Daniel held the paper for a long time, reading that sentence again and again. He hadn't seen Ethan since the hospital. But he understood. Ethan had stepped into his life to hold it together when it was breaking apart. He had carried the pain Daniel couldn't speak, fought the battles Daniel had once avoided, and crossed lines Daniel was too gentle to approach. But now he had stepped away, not because he was abandoning him, but because he trusted him to continue. Later that day, Daniel stood in the lobby, his notebook under his arm, the proposal in his hand. As employees passed by, some nodded, some smiled, and a few whispered quiet thank yous. They were starting to see him differently now. Not just as the man who had survived, but the one who had returned with fire in his voice. He stopped at the wall of photographs near the main exit. The same wall that had once been a monument to carefully curated company pride. He reached into his bag, pulled out a small framed photo, and pinned it to the corner. Hannah Cole. Her face calm, eyes kind. The photo Olivia had found in an archived profile directory.
No caption. No headline.
Just her presence. Daniel stepped back. It was a small act, but it meant something. Behind him, someone whispered, "Who's that?" "Someone we forgot," another voice said. And Daniel smiled. Because not anymore. Not again. It was raining the morning Daniel stood before the board of directors. Not a soft, misty rain, the kind that brushes your skin gently, but a cold, steady downpour that seemed determined to remind the city of its weight. The lobby of Trivex Technologies glowed under harsh white lights, the windows streaked with water. Everything outside looked blurred and gray. But Daniel had never felt clearer. He wore no tie, no carefully polished speech. Just a black notebook under his arm and the proposal for the Red File Initiative in his hand. He entered the executive conference room at exactly 9 a.m. The room was full. 12 directors. 2 legal observers. Claire Donovan. And to his surprise, Jacob Rains, no longer seated at the head of the table but off to the side, his expression unreadable. Daniel stood at the center of the room. He didn't speak right away. He opened the notebook. Looked at the worn corners, the ink-smudged pages, the quiet legacy of what had almost been lost. Then he began. "This company broke my brother," he said. "But it didn't start with him. And it didn't end when you suspended the man who pulled the final string." He paused. No one interrupted. "You've asked me here to present a policy proposal. I will. But if you're expecting slides, statistics and jargon, you won't get them. Because what this company needs isn't another strategic framework." He raised the notebook. "It needs a soul." He took a breath. "I was nearly erased by a system that thrives on silence. I was labeled unstable, difficult, uncooperative, because I questioned things. Because I hesitated to comply without reason. Because I protected people no one wanted to protect." He set the notebook on the table. "And while you were celebrating growth metrics and market expansion, people like Hannah Cole were disappearing. And you called it attrition. You called it turnover. You called it normal." One of the directors, an older man in a gray suit, leaned forward. "What exactly are you asking us to do, Mr. Reed?" Daniel met his gaze. "Stop pretending that silence is neutral." He walked to the end of the table and handed each person a printed copy of the proposal. "The Red File Initiative isn't a PR move. It's a shift in power. It proposes 3 core changes. 1. An internal ethics council elected by employees, not appointed by leadership. 2. a mandatory third-party audit of all internal complaint resolutions for the past 5 years. And 3, an open access repository of anonymized HR data, so we can track patterns and recognize abuse before it escalates. There was a murmur around the room. Ambitious, one board member muttered. Necessary, Daniel replied. Claire Donovan raised a hand. If we open the archives, there will be blowback. Daniel nodded. I know. That's why I'm not just proposing policy. I'm offering accountability. Starting with me. He pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to the legal observers. My full statement. Every detail. Every log. Every mistake I made, including my silence. I'll take responsibility for the role I played, but I won't carry it alone anymore. The room was silent. Daniel looked around the table. You can choose to accept this plan, or you can bury it. But understand this, something has already changed. People are awake now. They're watching. They're speaking. And whether or not you act today, this story won't go away. He stepped back. I didn't come here to keep my job. I came to offer you the chance to keep your integrity. Then he waited. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one board member, Olivia Grant, from Data Ethics, slowly nodded. I support it, she said. And I recommend we vote. Hands began to rise. 7. Then 9. Then 11. Jacob Rains remained still. He didn't vote. He only looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. Or regret. Or perhaps nothing at all. The vote passed. The Red File initiative would begin. Daniel left the room to no applause.
No cheers.
Just the quiet rustling of paper behind him. And that was enough. Outside, the rain had softened. He stepped out into the street and let it touch his face. Later that week, Ethan returned to the hospital. Not as a visitor, but to deliver something Daniel had requested, a box of old journals, old drafts, and a letter from their father that had once been buried deep in a closet. They didn't talk much. They sat on a bench in the hospital garden, beneath the tall oak trees that swayed gently in the wind. I heard you went back to the coast, Daniel said. Yeah. Just for a while. You look different. I feel different. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan said, You were always the brave one. I just borrowed your skin until I could find my own. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe we both became what we were afraid of. And found out it didn't kill us. Ethan nodded. Then stood. You good? Daniel looked up at him.
No.
But I'm getting there. They hugged briefly, awkward, tight, unfinished. The kind of hug that didn't close a chapter but promised another. Back at Trivex, the first Red File Council meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Employees were already nominating peers to sit on it. The whispers had stopped. People were starting to speak plainly. Claire Donovan had submitted her resignation. Jacob Rains had been offered early retirement with no public statement. But for once, silence wasn't enough to hide the truth. It was Daniel's voice that now filled the halls, not loud, not demanding but steady. Measured. Real. And in an industry addicted to progress without reflection, he became something rare. A man who walked back into the fire not to burn it down, but to light a way out. Not just for himself, but for anyone who still believed their voice was too small to matter.